Gyantimidandasya Gyananjanachalakaya Chakshurun Militham Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Aschatyate Satharine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Deve Pranamami Hari Priye Pranamami Hari Priye Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I am very grateful to be with all of you this evening. This is like the spiritual world. If only you could see what you all look like in front of all these beautiful mountains and trees. My special gratitude to Sushant and Namrata for very kindly opening the doors to their hearts and homes to all of us this evening. And my gratitude to Chandrashekhar, who is the leader of the Silicon Valley Bhakti Society, and they have a beautiful temple in Mountain View. To my godbrothers, Akruranath, Shamsundar, and Rajiv, Sanjeev, and Rajesh, who really helped bring this beautiful gathering together. It was in about 1969. My beloved Guru, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was in London. He was being interviewed by a newspaper. They challenged him. Why have you come to England? He said, we have our own religions, we have our own society, why have you come? And Srila Prabhupada smiled. He said, you British, you controlled India for almost 2 centuries. And so many of the treasures of India you brought to London. But you forgot to take the greatest treasure of India, our culture. I have come to bring to you what you forgot to take. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes give an analogy that in those days, in the 70s and the 60s, America was very strong economically, but quite blind spiritually and morally. Whereas India was very, quite weak economically, but with a culture of such deep, profound, inclusive spiritual vision. He said, if there is a lame man and a blind man, then the lame man could get on the, on the blind man's shoulders. And together they both have strength and vision. And Srila Prabhupada explained India's culture, its inclusive philosophical spiritual vision, and the technology, the science, and the economic power of the West, if they harmonize together, could actually lead the world in a very bright and great direction. There was once a meeting between Albert Einstein and another very, very great physicist of the time. And that physicist said to Einstein that Western society is like an incredibly well-built ship with no compass. And Albert Einstein agreed. And many people, historically, have turned to the East for that compass. India has its problems. But when I first came there in 1970, I was 19 years old. I was quite amazed at the inclusiveness that this culture of India, the unity and diversity that it could sustain. Through the Vedas, India was the home place of Hinduism, Vaishnavism, and all of its various branches, yoga, the homeland of Buddhism, the homeland of the Jains, the shelter for so many Parsis who came from Iran, the shelter of the Tibetan Buddhists when they came from China. It has one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. And it has one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Christianity spread there 2,000 years ago, just after Christ. An incredible land with an incredible spiritual foundation. But unfortunately, we find so much that people of India are running from their own culture to find the flickering things of the West. When Srila Prabhupada came back to India, he brought Shyam Sundar and other Western people. And he would tell everyone that so many Indians are going to the West because they think the West had the right thing. So I brought people from the West to come to India to remind you of what you have right here. There's a beautiful analogy I learned when I lived in the Himalayas. It's an analogy about life itself for everyone. It talks about a musk deer. The musk fragrance is so costly. It often, you have to pay $40,000 for a kilo of it. The extract from a gland from a male deer. I have a friend who has a gland in his closet. And when he opens his closet, the entire house has a intoxicating aroma. And he touches it to your hand and it stays there all day. So the musk deer is smelling this fragrance and spends his whole life trying to find it. Sometimes looking in thorny bushes and getting all cut up. Sometimes crossing rivers and risking life. Traveling, wandering, trying to find it. And ultimately dies without realizing that what he's looking for is within himself. And this is the basic principle of Bhagavad Gita and every scripture of the world. If we cannot find happiness, peace, love within ourselves, we could never find real fulfillment anywhere or in anything. There's a saying that in an evolved human society, people love people and they use things. But how much do we see within this world how people love things and use people to get them and to keep them? A satisfying life is not one of only quantity, but satisfaction comes through quality. The most fundamental need of every living being is pleasure. The Brahma Sutra tells Anandamayo Bhyashat that everyone is seeking pleasure. The little insects, the birds that are singing, the person flying that airplane or whatever it is, and every classification of human beings. We seek pleasure and we want to avoid pain because it interferes with our pleasure. Things could give pleasure to the senses and to the mind, but they cannot give any pleasure to the heart. Only love can give pleasure to the heart. To love and to be loved is the fundamental need of everyone. And sometimes in the emptiness of having that, we try to fill it with so many things. Power, prestige, wealth, fame, so many things. But it cannot satisfy the heart. And the Vedas teach us that the origin of that love is our natural love for God, who has many names. Just recently, in April, I was speaking at the House of Lords. And there were royal highnesses, dukes and duchesses, and lords and ladies, counts, marquises. And I spoke so many things, but one particular thing I said, everyone applauded. And it was such a simple thing, such a common sense thing. but yet it moved them so much. And actually, afterward, many of those people came up to me and told me that one sentence I spoke really changed their whole outlook of life. And I was thinking, it's such common sense. But it really struck them. Would you like to hear it?
Yes.
If you want to know how rich you are, just find out how many things you have that money cannot buy. There's one thing that money cannot buy: love. That's the true wealth. And when we connect to that love that is within ourselves, and that becomes our foundation, then whatever we do in our life, with our wealth, with our power, with our fame, to whatever extent there may be, it will be an expression of that love. We can be instruments of that love. And that is where the greatest happiness can be found. And that is where we can actually spread happiness. William Shakespeare said, if you lose your wealth, you lose nothing. If you lose your health, you lose something. If you lose your values, you lose everything. What is really valuable? This is where culture is so required. Spiritual, moral culture in human society. What is really valuable? How we could really make a positive difference in this world today. My own mother, she taught me such deep, profound values, but I didn't appreciate it, and I didn't understand it till I left home and became a Swami in the jungles of India. I remember when I was a little boy and it was her birthday. She would get a nice pearl necklace. She would get some nice little jewels. She would get some beautiful things to decorate her house. And I always forgot it was her birthday until that day. So I would run outside into our little backyard, and she had a small rose garden that she really loved to grow roses. And I would break a rose off of her garden, just like, and I would run and give it to her with all the thorns on it. She would cry in joy. She would touch it to her head, she would smell it, she would press it to her heart, and she'd look at me and thank you so much. She said, it's not the thing that counts, it's the thought that counts. What gives meaning and value to a gift, she taught me, is not just what it is, but it's the love in which it's given. Because that love gives satisfaction to the heart. The thing, it may be precious or it may be a thorny rose, whatever it is, but that love has value beyond any monetary consideration. And this world is in such great need of leadership, especially people who, mothers and fathers, are leaders. Politicians are leaders. People who are accomplished in business, in industry, in technology, in science are leaders. who Bhagavad Gita teaches us whatever we can do, we should do it with full capacity, but with the foundation of deep, compassionate values of love. When we actually care about each other, we have the power to communicate in a way that is profound. An example, when I was 19 years old, as we write about in this book, I hitchhiked from London to the Himalayas. It took about 6 months. Now I take an airplane from London to India and it takes about 8 hours. Same distance. It's not as scenic, not as life-changing, but much safer. While I was in the Himalayas, I lived with this one, he was a sadhu. His name was Kailash Baba. He was about 6'4", a huge mountain of a person. And he taught me how to live in the jungle. Because coming from the suburbs of Illinois, it was a very different place for me. He taught me how to eat, what herbs and fruits and leaves were edible and what were not. He taught me what we could find in the forest for medicine, because I was getting sick a lot. And he would just pick up some leaves and make me eat them and I'd get better. One special thing he taught me is how to live in harmony with our neighbors. There were leopards, there were wild boar, wild elephants, cobras, vipers, scorpions, and lots of mosquitoes. And he taught me that if you think yourself to be superior to any of them, or if you feel fear of them, they will kill you. He taught that you have to honor the sacredness of their life. This is the basic principle of all real spiritual paths. How to honor, respect, and love the sacredness of life. Najayate mriyate vakadachat. The Gita tells that our true identity is the Atma, the living force, the soul that's seen through the eyes and hearing through the ears and smelling through the nose and tasting through the tongue, thinking through the brain. That living force, that Atma, is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Mamaivam so jivalokha, and it's a part of God. And when we realize our own spiritual essence, when we realize who we really are, the witness of this ever-changing body that's subject to old age, disease, and death, then we can actually see that spiritual brotherhood and sisterhood we have with all living beings. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmanika vihastini sunichaiva svapakecha pandita samadarsha. This means that real wisdom is to see every being with equal vision. And when we have that enlightenment, the love within our heart we discover manifests as compassion toward others. He was teaching me that if you don't honor the living force, the Atma, within the snakes and the leopards, then you will fear them or feel yourself superior, and they will kill you. Because this is their land and you are a guest. Now they were all around us. Some of you I met are professors at colleges. So usually you give your students a little time to actually understand the subject. But I had to understand immediately. But you know something? Because I was with Kailash Baba, I understood it. Just being with him, because he had no fear. And because he had such compassion upon them. I was feeling the same way. And the most amazing thing about this experience with him is he did not speak a word of English. And I didn't speak any Hindi at the time. But because he cared so deeply about me, the communication of that love and that care taught me more than I ever learned in school. Just last year, with my dear brother Vaisheshika Prabhu, we went to the Muir Woods. How many of you have been there? It's really a beautiful forest of redwood trees. Every year we go there because I travel so many places and communicate with so many people. It's such a retreat for me to just go into this beautiful redwood forest with my dear friend and just walk and walk and walk. Some of the trees are thousands of years old. Many are hundreds of years old. We came to a group of Chinese tourists. They were standing in a circle around a park ranger. And we kind of stood behind them and listened to see what the park ranger was going to talk about. He said something that really, really impacted me. And I've been telling people all over the world what I heard from this park ranger. And I'd really like to share it with you. He told the underground secret of the redwood forest. And coming from the 60s in America, I'm very attracted to underground types of things. He said that the redwood trees are the largest, tallest trees on the planet. For most trees, the roots have to grow very, very deep in order to sustain it. But the redwood roots do not grow deep. Then he asked a question. How could these trees keep growing taller and taller and taller and bigger than any other trees without deep roots in a place where the soil is loose? It's hilly terrain. In the winter, there are massive blizzards and windstorms. And over the millenniums that they've been standing there and growing, there have been devastating earthquakes. How do they keep growing? Then he paused. So everyone had to think about it. Even I'm pausing. Then he told the underground secret. The roots of the redwood tree grow out. Underground, they grow outward reaching for the roots of another redwood tree. And as soon as the roots of two redwood trees meet, they wrap around each other. They embrace each other and create a permanent bond. And all the redwood trees in the whole forest, on all sides of each one, their roots are intertwining with the roots of other redwood trees. In this way, every tree in the forest practically is connected to each other. Unity is their strength. They can grow higher and bigger than any other because they have each other. United we stand, divided we fall. The roots of our hearts is our affection for each other. Despite our differences, and there are so many differences that people fight over in this world and kill over in this world, if we actually can respect the sanctity of life, and we can interconnect with each other as friends, as family, as human family, that care coming from the roots of our hearts can give us such great strength that we can grow and survive every possible obstacle and actually be instruments of great positive change in the world. The Gita tells Yad Yad Acharati Sresthas Tatat Evitarojana, that what leaders do, the common people naturally follow. So how important it is, what a wonderful opportunity we have to actually have a beautiful influence in our society, in our smaller society and in the greater human society, and ultimately to all beings. If we just embrace these universal values. Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatvamam shantimrichyati. That if you want to find real peace and actually help spread real peace, there's a simple formula. To understand that our Supreme Mother, Father, the Supreme Lord, who we call Krishna, who has many names, is the ultimate proprietor of everything that exists. And we are caretakers. When I was a little boy, I'll never forget, I was sitting on my mother's bed watching her put mascara on her eyes. And she looked at me and she said, "Everyone loves your father and everyone loves me, but we do not love each other anymore. We have decided to separate." I was 8 years old. I was so disoriented. It gave me so much pain that it felt like the whole world fell out from under me and I had nothing to hold on to. I just sat there, didn't say a word, and I cried. My mother looked at me and she couldn't say a word, and I ran out. A few hours later, my father came home and I knew she was going to tell him this. So they closed their bedroom door and I put my ear to the door. And she told him what happened. There was silence. Then I heard them say, "For the higher principle of the welfare of our children, we will work everything out and never separate. It was a struggle, but they had a higher principle. On the lower level, we have within our families, within our businesses, within the society, so many things we could disagree about because we all have our own egos. Unity can only come when we actually agree on a higher principle. And after some years, I practically never saw such a deep, respectful, loving relationship between two human beings as my mother and father. They earned it. And when my mother passed away, they were married for 58 years, which is quite good in America. The higher principle. In other words, this is not just my wife or my husband or my children or my business or my wealth or my abilities. This is entrusted to me by God. And when something is entrusted to me, I have a great responsibility to utilize it in such a way that's truly beneficial for others. There's a saying that to make a living, you have to get things. But to make a life, you have to give things. In Sanskrit, this is called seva. To serve without selfish expectations. To serve like those redwood tree roots. To reach out, to be there for each other. To actually care. And when we become leaders, especially powerful leaders, with these values, with these ethics, we actually can change the world. Our responsibility is not just to market products, but to market values and culture along with the products. Because the way we do things, the dignity and the integrity in which we do things, is actually what we're giving the next generation. That is the standard that they will consider sacred. And when we take this responsibility of compassion in our life, my dear friend Rajiv, where's Rajiv? Do you mind if I tell a little of your background? If you think Raghunath embarrassed, wait till you hear it. He used to be a brahmachari, a little sadhu sleeping on the floor of our temple for several years. His mother and father, his father was a doctor for the Indian Railways, and he didn't get much of a pension. So Rajiv is a monk, sleeping on the floor of the temple of everybody else, getting up at 4 in the morning and doing his japa meditation, his chanting the Maha Mantra and reading Srimad Bhagavat and doing Mangalarti and doing seva. And then he requested, I need to have a job to help my mother and father. I said, all right, whatever. So he got a job and he was working. And I said, if you're going to have a job like this, it's more natural for you to be married. He said, no, I don't want to get married. But I need to do this. But after a year or two of working, and he was such an ideal, incredible monk, He said, I think what you're saying is right. And he married one of the most wonderful ladies. I think she's here. Brenda Priya or Vinita, where are you? And his two beautiful, wonderful daughters. And he just was working for some kind of software company, and he was doing real good, and he was making a lot of money for this company. And one day he came to me in Mumbai and said, I want to start my own company. He said, but I don't want to just make money only for me. He said, I want to do it for Krishna in society. And he said, can I give 50% of everything I make for that purpose? I said, follow your heart. And since that time, his business he has this Midas touch on his own level. Whatever he does, it just grows and it grows and it grows. But he doesn't consider anything his own. He's remained, it's one thing to be a simple person and make the promise, but it's another thing to keep it. And he is so enthusiastic and so determined, and he works so hard to develop businesses because he has such a divine purpose behind it. This is the Gita. Krishna didn't tell Arjuna, you don't have to do your job, just meditate. Go to the forest. He said, if you're going to be doing this for a divine purpose, you should be fighting with more enthusiasm, with more determination, with more creativity than anyone. Because you're not doing it out of greed. Love is a much greater power than selfishness. Love is the greatest power in the world. To connect to that power, to be motivated in that way. That's the leadership that this world desperately needs. The younger generation in India, in the West, is getting so many signals that by hook or crook, to become powerful and wealthy is the standard of what's of real value in this world. And what's happening to the world and the quality of life, and where is the inner satisfaction? In my 62 years of walking around in this world, I found that the youth doesn't hear so much what we tell them. They hear what they see. This is the greatest need. To cultivate those values, that compassion within our own lives and lead the world. In our society, we have spiritual practices like the chanting of God's names, the names of Krishna, to develop a foundation that we can really build our whole life upon. And I'm just so proud of Rajiv and others like that. And I'm so grateful to all of you for allowing me to share some of these thoughts and realizations with you. This is a wonderful time in history. Right now it's a time where a lot of transitions are happening. The ecology, the environment, the economy, the conflict among religions. This is a very exciting, incredible time where we could come together to really make a great sustainable change in consciousness and in people's lives. Thank you very much.
So this time, we'd like you to ask a couple of questions if you have any things to ask. And I'm going to begin the first one. Maharaj, my question to you is, there are many first generation entrepreneurs here who've come from very humble backgrounds and they have created enormous wealth generation. My question to you is, imagine a situation where a person, for example, made $100 million of net worth, suppose, and for the next generation to take it to $110 million is not a motivation at all. They've seen so much, and the parents have raised the bar, the level so high that practically we've seen examples of people who are worth billions and billions of dollars, and their children are not motivated to take to their father's business because the bar is raised so high that they can just not match it. It's a second generation that gets very disillusioned. They sometimes even drop out of mainstream business. What is your message for this second generation to be able to sustain the family's values and to, take it forward? Or in other words, what is the secret for the wealth of families to last over generations? What needs to be done for that?
You are asking a man who has not had a bank account or signed a check since 1969. But if you ask a Swami, you're going to get a Swami's answer. My observation, because I have seen this dilemma happening in so many people's lives, that disconnect between generations. That somehow through our actions and through our own values, if we can communicate to our children that the real value of what you're going to be working for is something of quality, not just of quantity. You can make a difference in the lives of people in this world by doing this. You can provide things, spiritual education and other, emotional and physical requirements that people don't have. You can save people's lives on every level if we can provide. That excites children. Just to amass more and more and more and more may not. And they may not be able to do as much as their parents have done. And when their parents started from nothing and have this, sometimes they want to do that too. They don't want to just take what's already there. They want to do what their father has done. And some of them can do it, but some of them can't, and they get really depressed because they kind of expect themselves to do that, because that's the standard. The standard is to be a self-made man. And I've seen a lot of depression. But if the actual standard is, this is what we're doing it for. We're doing it in the service of God. We're doing it for the upliftment of humanity. That's exciting. then on whatever level they're able to do it, they're excited and inspired because it's meaningful. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj. At this point of time, would you like to offer any of you? Would you like
Yes.
Swamiji, you have said many, many profound things. But one of the things you have said is very profound, is the role of consciousness in changing people's lives, in changing people's societies. And you have traveled all over the globe. How to raise people's consciousness? Can you give us a few tips? Can you just give us a few tips?
Most important is our example. The values that we hold sacred in life and live by, and the example that we set through that will have a great effect. And for us, we practice bhakti or seva. And we cultivate through the chanting of mantra, God's names, and associating with people who are uplifting us. It gives us something, it gives us this strong foundation. And then with great determination, creativity, and enthusiasm, we build our life on that foundation of spiritual values. The integrity of that kind of life, more than anything else, is what we can do to change the consciousness of the people around us and the whole world. Consciousness is so powerful. Every time we have negative thoughts or speak negative words or act negatively, that negativity is an energy that spreads throughout the universe. And on a certain level, it affects everyone. When we think positively, speak positively, act positively, that has a positive influence on the universe. And when we think, speak, and act with devotion to God and compassion for others, that has an extremely powerful effect of changing the consciousness of the whole planet. These are universal principles. Is there any other questions anyone would like to ask?
Swamiji, just wanted to ask you a question about this whole thing about negativity and as we think of negative thoughts and so. And I've always felt in myself, and I can speak for myself very clearly, is that at one level we feel connected to human beings and we feel that we are one. But yet in real world, when we go out and we compete with people, we are trying to outdo each other. Not necessarily we have negative thoughts about it, but the whole act of competition and the act of doing business and so on and so forth engenders a certain sense that you've got to get ahead of someone, you've got to compete with someone. And therein lies the conflict between what you feel as connected roots versus what you feel as a competitor and someone you're trying to outdo. Is that a real conflict, or should we be home with it and like Arjun be able to say, all right, if I have to kill my relatives, I'll go ahead and kill them? What's your view?
Thank you for putting me on the spot so nicely. We could be like the redwood trees in the forest. We could compete on growing higher and higher and higher, but we keep our roots connected to help each other to do that. Um, in this world, competition is a necessity. If you don't compete and try to outdo somebody, you usually get stomped down into the ground. Is that the way it works? That's my observation, because I'm just a little Swami. So, you know, that dynamic, determined ability to get ahead in our career and our occupation is a necessity for people in this world. But what are our values? Are we conquering our competitors to hurt them? Or are we just doing it so that we can do better and better ourselves, so that we can do more good for the world? That is an option that we all have. We can compete with love, not hate. We can compete with a motive of generosity, not greed. We can compete with great enthusiasm and creativity, with humility and not arrogance. And that's where fulfillment comes. And that's where we could change the world. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
One last question. Anyone there? Anyone has a question? One last question before we break for dinner. Thank you very much. Thank you for the gift of your time. Thank you for coming here and being with us this evening. I want to just remind you, there is another program scheduled on Sunday, 16th of June, at 10 o'clock in the morning at the Thai Global Hall, Bunker Hill Lane, Santa Clara, where Maharaj will be addressing a group of professionals who are coming there. Many of you are also going to join us for that program. May we invite you to please come there if you can spare the time. I know it's Father's Day, but if you can come there, Maharaj will be speaking on a very diverse subject. It will be more about how to blend business and spirituality, the culture of wealth. What wealth can do to you, you know, if it's an uncontrolled mind and there is wealth, what it can do. So Maharaj is going to be speaking about that. Means, as I say, you know, it's very, nothing fails like success. You know, we grew up learning that nothing succeeds like success, but that is a time when you are most vulnerable. When you let your guard down, Maharaj is going to speak about what is the culture of wealth and how it acts, what comes with the power of wealth. And please take some time and please attend that. You never know, sometimes a single thought, can change your life, right? So we thank you very much for being here today with us. May I again remind you, please take the time. There is a documentary there which they have very painstakingly they are putting together. Please just go in the room and just have, it's hardly a 5-7 minute thing. It's going on the monitor. You may just want to have a look at that. And I would also invite you to please interact with Vaisheshika Prabhu after when the prasadam is being served there. So Maharaj, thank you very much for your presence. Maharaj just flew in today for this special program. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We request you to have a nice round of applause for Maharaj for being here. At this point of time, I will request all of you to please come and take dinner prasadam. Thank you once again for being here.
Thank you very much.
You might want to come and
In Mumbai.
Yeah, in Mumbai.
Very nice.
The three partners, they have formed
You
in
might
Singapore.
want to
They
come
all
and
in
meet
Singapore,
Maharaj
right?
and introduce
I'm in
yourself.
Mumbai,
We'll be
but I
very
spent
happy
half
to.
my time maybe in Mumbai,
Okay, gentlemen, we have Govind standing here. Please, we request you to just